Professor Simon Jackman for more on this and what's driving things in the US in, of course, an election year. Kind of strikes me that for Donald Trump, the frustration is what is the point in being involved in anything unless he can tell the media all about it, complete with his hot takes? Is there anything more frustrating for Donald Trump than a gag order?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And of course, it's tied to his business interests, right? Right now, one of the biggest sources of income or wealth generation for Donald Trump is Truth Social. And as Truth Social, of course, is the destination or the would-be destination of these social media posts. And indeed, the Trump's attorneys at one point said, here are 10 posts we'd like to put up on Truth Social. Can you vet them to see if they violate the gag order? And the judge said, I'm not touching that. That's not my job. And hence that quip, I think, about just writing the judge a check for $10,000 every Monday. This is enormously frustrating for Trump. He wants to be on the campaign trail. He is feigning sort of disinterest and nodding off and throughout the trial. But his real audience are not the people that are clued in to this trial minute by minute, but the general election constituency that's paying, I think, far less interest in this trial than you or I or avid viewers of Sky News might be, Tom.
Yeah, I mean, the other aspect is he's almost been blown off the front page, hasn't he? And we'll get to that protest issue in a moment. A quick one on this, though. I mean, we haven't heard, I think, anything particularly new. There's the descriptor of a chronic blackmailer, but it's reminded us, but basically in this case, there's a whole raft of people saying, yes, this was hush money, and it's basically Donald Trump saying no.
Look, I don't think at the end of the day, Trump will prevail on that. What this case is really going to turn on Trump, and this is why, Tom, and this is why it's more technical than it might first seem. These are misdemeanors on their face, right? Falsifying business records, campaign finance violations. What they're trying to say is that it's the combination of that rises this to a felony, or elevates this to a felony. Now, the jury, that's very difficult, I think, for a jury to get their head around. Yes, that seems wrong, and yes, that seems wrong, but somehow you want us to put 2 and 2 together and come up with like 4.5, as it were. That's where I think this case gets hard. I think the facts are pretty clear. It's how you put all this together and get to a felony conviction at the end of this versus what would otherwise be misdemeanors, fines, those sorts of penalties might accrue. Yeah. How you take this all the way up to a felony, that's where I think the jury may have trouble with returning a guilty verdict.
And that's interesting. I mean, maybe he can say, oh, they were after me, but at the same time, maybe the overall verdict includes, a jury saying, yeah, you paid the hush money. How that's construed, we'll see. So these university protests, they're massive in the US. I know you have some experience in universities over there. The big issue seems to be universities are used to protests and pretty tolerant of university populations protesting, but a lot of this is coming from, and where it's ramping up, people not even going to the university.
Yeah, so Tom, this is a sort of a structural issue for universities. They're physically open places in the main. Columbia University in New York being a little unusual, an urban campus that's actually easier to lock down and to keep non-students away from camps. You can check for IDs at the door, as it were. It looks like analysis of the arrests at Columbia suggested about 29% of those arrested were not students. And this is where life gets hard for university administrators. You've got these open physical spaces that, and it's one thing to police your students and impose sanctions on them through academic processes and whatnot. University administrators have very little degrees of freedom when it comes to outsiders, non-students coming onto campus and looking to make trouble. And as I said, 29% of those arrested at Columbia the other night appear to be not from the university community. And I suspect that number is higher at other campuses where they are even more open physically, and it's easier for non-students to get onto campus and engage in protest.
We've seen, look, how the pictures now, how violent they're getting as well. For Joe Biden, it's a tricky line he's got to walk on this, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. And so the issue here, of course, Biden needs the youth vote, quote unquote, that traditionally leans Democratic and I think otherwise would be highly disinclined to vote for Trump. Biden, of course, has to condemn the violence and has to, I think, as is consistent with US policy, stand with Israel. but he's on very shaky ground given how widespread these protests are and how they are clearly animating. So many young people feel outraged by what's been happening on the ground in Gaza.
Yeah.
So right now, a lot of the criticism, a lot of the calls for calm, that's about as specific as Biden has been getting. It's been up to third parties and surrogates to really, I think, prosecute the sort of more nuanced elements of this debate, keeping Biden well away from trotting on any landmines here. It's a very vexed issue for him with respect to the constituency he's trying to build for the general election in November, Tom.
Just seems closer, doesn't it? I guess it gets closer every week when we talk. Simon, talk next week.
Every Friday.